Well, greetings, sauna enthusiasts. This is a great episode. I'd like to introduce to you John Richter. He is the writer of Chest Freezer Cold Plunge, the ebook on how to convert your chest freezer into a cold plunge tank. He is a great evangelist of the Wim Hof Method and cold exposure. So immediately I was interested in what he's all about. And it's great to have these two tribes of DIY enthusiasts, chest freezer cold plunge converters and backyard sauna builders, DIY folks, converge. John has a great story about how he got into cold plunge and what it means for him. You'll hear some of that discussion. And what I like also is he is very knowledgeable about how to maintain a cold plunge tank. He calls the three key elements of good water is the circulation, filtration, and sanitation, and the components that he recommends that help maintain clean water in your cold plunge tank. I thought that was pretty cool, and we will hear more about his history, how he got into this, and how he helps others from all over the world through his knowledge and efforts of exhaustive efforts on how to make a cold plunge tank. So great episode, really fun to visit, great guy, and I look forward to sitting on the sauna bench with John and partaking in some cold water action, and hope you guys will too. This show is brought to you by Urban Wing. Urban Wing is a Minnesota, USA-based artisan craft shop specializing in custom designed cedar products. In addition to their best-selling cedar patio heater and umbrella tables, I am a big fan of Urban Wing's elegantly designed patent-pending knobless sauna vent covers. They are easy to install, give you infinite control over fresh air while sitting on your sauna bench, which drastically helps improve your sauna's ventilation and performance. As readers of SaunaTimes are well aware, ventilation is one of the holy trinity elements for good sauna, the other two being heat and steam. Also, a great gift for the sauna lover could be a pair of Urban Wing's SaunaTimes collaborated backrests. The cool thing about these traditional style backrests is that they can be configured a few different ways: upright for sitting, and long ways for laying down on the bench. Additionally, the Sauna Pro can lock one backrest into the other, creating a relaxed recline, which has been known to increase your bench time and reduce low bench Larry tendencies by 15%. I've sat in hundreds of different saunas, and these backrests nail it. To learn more about these Urban Wing products and to order, please visit www.urbanwingco.com. 100% of the proceeds of your purchase go to a former corporate soldier who is building a craft business where he never has to fill out a TPS report again. www.urbanwingco.com. Now on to the show. Well, hey, so another episode of Sauna Talk, and the Zoom series or the COVID series is great because we are able to have guests. As you guys know, listening to Sauna Talk, we usually will be sitting on the sauna bench and recording. But in a pandemic kind of thing, it's sort of opened up the geography and being able to have what we call the global series here at Sauna Talk. And I'm super pleased today on a rainy day in Minneapolis to introduce John Richter to Sauna Talk. John, welcome aboard.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. I appreciate you having me here today. It's great to connect with you.
It is great. It is great. And in the world of your life these days, how are you most known? Can you introduce yourself and what you're doing
Sure.
to the best?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been known, or actually in the last 4 years, about 4 years ago, I dove into the space of do-it-yourself cold plunges. And the primary way of going about that is helping people convert a chest freezer into a cold plunge.
Mhm. And
And so,
you've experienced many different types of methods for cold plunge, and I'd like you to speak to that. But before I ask you for that information, let's wind the clock back even further. I want to say maybe 2013, even earlier, maybe. Is that tell us about how and why and where you first became exposed to, pardon the pun, but
right.
exposed to the cold plunge therapy.
Yeah, that's great. It would be good to say, probably going prior to 2013, that growing up in Central Texas, which is a subtropical climate, I have always hated the cold. We have this beautiful natural springs swimming pool in Austin, Texas, called Barton Springs, and it's only like 67 to 71 degrees year round. But as a kid, I hated that water. It's almost sacrilegious to say that as an Austinite, but it was just too cold to me. I would get in and my feet would turn purple. I was miserable, and I avoided it as much as possible. Of course, I could never say that, but what happened, fast forward in 2013, a friend of mine said, "Hey, this guy Wim Hof is coming to town," and I said, "Well, tell me about that." And she said, "Well, it's all about getting into this ice bath and doing this breath work." And I thought, "Ice bath? What's that?" She said, "Well, it's filling up a big old tank of water with a stock tank with a couple 100 pounds of ice." And I said, that doesn't sound like my idea of a good time. Why would I pay money to do that? And the resistance to doing that was so profoundly strong that it actually caught my attention. And I thought, maybe there's something here. So I did that Wim Hof workshop in Austin in 2013, and that's really what set everything else into motion.
Mm.
And then, of course,
So was it an immediate, did it grab you immediately? Like you attended the workshop blindly, I'm sensing. I mean, you hadn't been doing breath work or cold exposure prior to. Take us back to that workshop. Did it hit you immediately as something wow, or was there resistance for yourself subconsciously, consciously?
Well, the workshop itself was really enjoyable. Wim, I know you've talked to Wim. He's an awesome guy, and certainly the breath work was something. I had practiced yoga before, but was not completely unfamiliar with breath work and pranayama. However, just the way that Wim introduced it had his take on it, which was different. And then, of course, the cold plunging was again a miserable experience the first time, but there was something different about it because of just the way he approached it and the way we went at it, and it kind of caught my attention. However, I think the difference here, living in Central Texas, is that we really don't get cold days very much out of the year. At that point, Barton Springs, ironically, became not cold enough. And it was just a hard time finding cold water. And I did there were a few people coming through town that did, hey, we're doing an ice thing, and or an ice bath, or a couple of other Wim Hof instructors came through, and I've volunteered staff their workshop to come in and do a cold plunge. But it definitely wasn't a regular practice until a few years later, when it became almost a medical necessity.
Oh, okay. So after the workshop, you knew that this is something you wanted to bring into your life, your routine. Is that right?
Well, I knew the breathing was really powerful, and there was quite a profound experience from doing the breath work. And certainly the cold, it made sense in terms of how it could benefit my health, people's health in general. But it wasn't something that seemed easy to get into just because of our climate here. And I guess my life was so busy in other ways. I just had a daughter who was born early, and that kind of actually, she was 27 weeks. We spent 121 days in a neonatal intensive care unit. And then she came home with a feeding tube and required around the clock feeding for about somewhere around 14 hours. And I was doing the night shift, 12 midnight and 3 a.m. on top of the, full-time job that I had at the time. And it didn't seem like I had space in my schedule to do ice baths. I was doing some really isolated things, but that's actually what led me to doing ice baths on a regular basis.
Right. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to stay with the chronology. So after the Wim Hof workshop in 2013, some time went by, you had a busy life and stuff, but you alluded to a need, something happened in your life. Are you comfortable to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened for me was just because of that schedule with my daughter, the insomnia, my sleep was so severely disrupted that the insomnia was pretty brutal, and it was getting to the point where I would have difficulty like doorways without hitting a wall or not walking into furniture. In the kitchen, I would slice my finger up frequently, cutting up vegetables for dinner. And I think the big wake up call for me was the day that I turned down to a street and could not believe why every other single driver was going the wrong way and honking at me until I realized that it was me who had turned the wrong way down a one-way street. And then I thought, this insomnia is affecting my ability to be safe and to keep others, and I'm putting other people at risk as well as myself. And that was a big wake up call for me.
And so,
So,
was it your own diagnosis or your own sort of treatment in a way to go into the cold, or was that recommended to you?
well, that's a good question. Yeah, what happened was to preface or to go up to the point about how marked the cold was. It would be really important to say what I did before that. And I won't go into the complete list because it's probably a couple of pages of things, but I did see a medical doctor, and he was a holistic medical doctor, like a full blown MD, but he also had a very holistic practice and looked at a lot of different things. And so I did everything from, and he was a very expensive medical doctor to talk to. He's one of those guys that doesn't accept insurance and it's cash up front, right?
Oh yeah.
But I tried a lot of different things from Western medical to natural natural remedies, from herbs to acupuncture, chiropractic. I was doing hot baths before bed, 112 degrees, 114 degrees. I did like neurotherapy, like neural feedback, where you put that brain cap on and do all this stuff, red light therapy, chiropractic, acupuncture. I was even doing the big cryo chambers, like where you would go into the big nitrogen chamber, and they would cool it down to 244 below zero Fahrenheit. And I had an unlimited membership. I did 3 months of that, and none of it really. Some of it helped a little bit, but none of it really improved the quality of my sleep.
So
Like no matter
John, would you just like sit there and look at the ceiling with your insomnia? I mean, you were desperate
well
for sleep. How many hours were you getting, and what was that like? I mean,
Right.
how
Well,
was
it
that?
was pretty brutal. I had no problems falling asleep. That was not an issue at all. What the problem was the quality of my sleep. When I actually did the neural feedback, the initial scan from that, I sent it off to the guy that I bought all this equipment from, and without even knowing any of my history or anything, he looked at those numbers and he said, "You're not getting any delta sleep." And I said, that's exactly what's going on. And then he said a couple of other things that were very interesting about my history, but that's irrelevant to this conversation. But what was happening is no matter how much sleep I got, no matter how many naps I would try to take in between my appointments in the afternoon, I was waking up completely exhausted. And so it was affecting like just my ability to think, focus, organize, plan. My memory was just shot. I was forgetting appointments, my work appointments. I was showing up or forgetting things there. I was just a very hard person to get along with. Just my ability to regulate my emotions was very difficult. I would get really angry at just little tiny things, and it was really hard just to show up as a kind, compassionate, friendly human being.
Yeah, right on. And about
So
what year was this? And it's
this was so in 2000, my daughter was born in June of 2013, and so I started the really brutal insomnia started kicking right around 2000, like a year later, maybe a year and a half later is when 2 years later is when the symptoms started getting really, really bad. And I think at the worst point was in 2017. That's where I turned down that one-way street and thought, oh boy, I've got to do something about this.
okay. So then what? So then cold came into your life again, right?
Right. And so cold came into my life, and and certainly the ice baths, and there was one place where you could drive to in town where there's two lakes that come together. There was a big dam, and that dam, all the cold water for the bigger lake was feeding that lower, like it was Lake Travis feeding into Lake Austin, and that was about 5 or 6 degrees colder than Barton Springs. And I would drive 25 or 30 minutes out there just to get that little bit more of colder water. But it was giving me some energy in the morning or during the day when I could sneak away to do that. Same thing with the cryo chambers. It would give me energy, but it was completely temporary. It was like putting a Band-Aid on a head wound. It wasn't fixing the source of the problem. And I was having a conversation with a friend who was a Wim Hof instructor, and she suggested that I try cold water ice baths before bed. And I said, well, wait a minute. Now, before bed, I'll be up I'm already having problems with sleep. The cold is energizing. It's going to keep me up all night long. That's not a great idea. And she goes, no, just try it. And so I thought, okay, I've got nothing to lose. I've done all this other stuff, and it hasn't been helping. So I went down to the convenience store. I bought 100 pounds of ice. I put it in my car, took it home, hauled it out of there into the bathroom, put it into the bathtub, and I got the water down to about 42 degrees and got the best night's sleep I'd had in more than 2 years.
And how long were you in the bathtub in that instance?
That's a really good question. I don't think that was probably the coldest water I'd been into, or probably close to it within, certainly from 2013 when I did the Wim Hof workshops, maybe except for those other 2 or 3 workshops that came through town. But, I wasn't doing my own ice baths before. So I think I'm pretty certain that I was not in there for any more than 3 minutes.
Right. And that was without, call it, prior training, because that workshop was several years prior. So you just basically committed yourself to getting the ice, putting it in the tub, and giving it a shot. And immediately that night you slept great.
I slept great. And I woke up, and it was odd waking up the next morning. I remember actually feeling not completely exhausted. I didn't feel like super gigantically well rested, but it was enough more of a rest than I had been getting before that it really caught my attention. Enough so that I thought, hey, I'm going to do this again. So I did that 3 more times, hauling 100 pounds of ice, bringing it in, getting an awesome night's sleep. And at that point, I realized hauling all that ice is going to get expensive. It's time consuming and it's a real hassle. And I'm not having fun hauling the ice. I enjoyed the results, but I thought there's got to be a better way.
Right on. Did the idea of an ice chest freezer hit you right then, or did you try other cold modalities?
Yeah, that's a great question. It didn't hit me right then. So what I did is I got on Google and I started looking like how to, ice bath or cold water, cold plunge. And I started searching. And the first thing that came up was the local pool companies. And I talked to a few of those guys, and they were, they wanted to come out and do the whole sales thing. And I thought, no, just tell me ballpark how much it's going to cost before I waste your time. And I found out that to put a cold plunge in the ground from a local pool company in Texas, where it's all hard limestone, it was going to cost somewhere between 30 to 70 grand. And that was way out of my budget. And so I started doing a little bit more research about it and found a company that was making a portable cold plunge that you could buy. And there was a couple of issues with it. The one is that the water only got down to about 45 degrees. And of course, in the Wim Hof group, they talk about 40 degrees as being your magic number to get the greatest amount of results from. And I thought, well, I got sleep from ice at 42 and that helped. But, if I'm going to go for it, that I really should get the water below 40. But the second problem, the key issue that I had was that those saunas were about $8,000 plus another, $800 or so for shipping. And that was just not in my budget at the time either. So I felt like I was stuck. Like I knew what the solution was, but it was either going to just be initially too expensive or over time too much of a hassle to haul ice. So I figured there's got to be a better way.
Right on.
So
then what happened? Did you go ahead?
Well, I called up my friend Elizabeth again. I said, hey, Elizabeth, the Wim Hof instructor, she had just left Austin because the water wasn't cold enough and she had moved to Colorado. And I said, look, I can't move to Colorado, but, do you have any other ideas? Like, what do you know? I mean, you're in this conversation as a Wim Hof instructor. And she said, well, some people have been using chest freezers. And I said, chest freezers? Huh. So I jumped onto the main Wim Hof Facebook group page and started looking through, and found a few comments out of the, thousands of comments that are on there about people said, yeah, I filled up this chest freezer and I'm using it as a cold plunge. And I thought, okay, cool. So I really didn't find much information about it, but so I, looked into some chest freezers, and I bought one and filled it up with water, and again, got a great night's sleep. Took about 3 days for it to chill down here in Austin, but got a great night's sleep. And I was just, all right, I thought I had found it. Okay, this is it. I couldn't believe how simple it was. Instant, accessible cold water.
Right.
And that was good for 3 days.
3 days. And then what?
Well, what happened on the third day is I came out, I lifted the lid up of the chest freezer, looked in, and there was rust just pouring out of the seams. And I thought, oh my God, I just killed a $600 or $700 chest freezer.
Oh, what a bummer.
So
yeah. And there were no rules back then. I mean, what you did was intuitively correct. You fill it a partial way with water, and then your body displacement, bring it up to the top. you were on top of the world for 3 days.
Right.
So you looked at this rusted out freezer. Was it completely shot, like
Well,
tossed in the garbage,
I
or
was
what?
worried that the amount, I mean, I had never experienced this before, and I'm not really an appliance guy. So I had no idea what I had done, but I just had this horrible sinking feeling that I just destroyed this chest freezer.
Mhm.
So I drained it and I, put it out in the sun, opened the lid, tried to bake the moisture out of it. And that's one advantage of living here in Texas. But after I did that, I figured out, well, it's not waterproof. I learned that. And I figured out there's got to be some way to seal the seams. And so that was really the first mistake, the big mistake, the problem that I ran into. And so I started, looking and reading and talking to people, jumping onto forums where people were discussing all things chest freezers. And it turned out that even when you use those things for food, most of the people, or many of the people, one of the common problems is rust. So I thought, shoot, if that thing rusts when you're, putting your food in there, what's going to happen when you fill it up with water?
Right.
So I knew all those little seams in there had to get sealed. So that was really the first problem that I had to solve. And, once I kind of got that figured out, I was so excited to be able to fill it up and not have the rust. And then it only took about a week or so to realize that problem number two is like, that water is starting to get dirty, and because it took, I guess now it's like August, and when those temperatures get up in the 90s and into triple digits here, it would take like about 4 days to chill that water down. And I thought, draining this water and then having it take 4 days to chill down new water, there's got to be a better way to do that to keep the water clean. And so that's when I started looking into swimming pools and hot tubs and talking to plumbers and electricians and all these different people in different industries about, how do we take this thing that's not meant to hold water, get it to hold water and keep the water clean. And that was like the holy grail of, chest freezers. And over the next, probably 7 to 8 months, I got that all dialed in and figured it out.
Well, T.S. Eliot once said, every moment is a fresh beginning.
Mm.
I'm stealing. I had to throw that in there because I'm fast forwarding in a big way to your book. And I love
No, I
your
love
book.
that.
I love your book. You've done such a wonderful job, including some really cool quotes in there. And, maybe as we go, I'll throw some softballs in there about some quotes. And that quote that you put in your own book, but it sounds to me as you drilled into the chest freezer cold plunge solution, the two major hurdles being, not meant for water. So I'm jumping right into your book. So forgive me if you want to fill in more gaps.
No, perfect.
And pardon the pun, but you're very detailed on how to retrofit an ice freezer so that it is water safe, or you could say, it doesn't rust, kind of deal. And then the other is you just mentioned about keeping the water clean. Is that it? Do you feel like you got it? Do you feel that well, first of all, are these the two hurdles for the DIY enthusiast to turn a chest freezer into a cold plunge tank? Or is there another hurdle, or are these the two?
Yeah, I would say those are two of the three biggest hurdles. And the third biggest hurdle being, well, I guess maybe there's four hurdles. So I would say the first hurdle is the paralysis of analysis, trying to figure it out and get it, trying to get too many details and then becoming indecisive about it. And so I've seen many people put off actually going the DI route because of that. Or I would say it's procrastination, and whether it's because they're doing too much research and not enough just putting it into action, or because they don't believe they can, pull off a DIY project, that would be the first hurdle. And then the second hurdle is jumping in without any information, just like what I did, the same mistake I made. It's fire, ready, aim, and then they have all these problems and a dead chest freezer, or problems they have to fix. And then and so after those two initial hurdles, waterproof, how do you get it to hold water and
Right.
stop the rust, how to do that safely and get a long lifespan on the chest freezer, and then how to keep the water clean are definitely the top two biggest things.
Yeah. Yep. And do you feel for the DIY enthusiasts here that by just following your book now, how much would it cost? Let's say I had or anybody listening has access through Craigslist or maybe even their own. First of all, what cubic foot chest freezer? I know you detail this in the book so wonderfully. You actually have 3 photos where you identify the 3 different size commonly, available chest freezers. What size chest freezer? And then assuming one got one of these on Craigslist or whatever, what sort of cost are we looking at to convert it completely to your standard?
Right. So there's a few different things that will, I guess, drive the size question. And the first one is really being, how big do you really need as an individual? And so what I would suggest is that people go down and either sit in a chest freezer in a store somewhere or get the measurements, the dimensions, and kind of mock one up to really find the size that is the best fit. Because if you have one that's too big, I mean, you can do that. It doesn't hurt to have it too big, but it's going to be more preparation, more work to get it going, and then it's not going to be gigantically more expensive in terms of electricity to run it, but it is a greater cost over time.
Mhm.
So and it does take up more space. So what is the right size will really vary depending upon your individual frame and everything else. So
Right.
on the other side of that, you don't want to be kind of scrunched up in this little thing, but we're also not lounging in it like a hot tub. We're not relaxing in there. It's a very limited 3 to 6 minute time frame for most people, and it doesn't need to be like super cozy. And the whole idea of getting into cold water is not about comfort anyway. But what I would suggest is kind of a baseline, though, would be the mid-range sizes, which are 14.8 cubic feet or 15 cubic foot chest freezer. And the reason I say that is because most of those chest freezers will then have a little bit higher quality if you can find one that has like the white enamel interior versus the bare metal aluminum walls.
Right.
And so the ones with the white enamel tend to be better constructed. They have better compressors. However, that said, if you live in a country like in the UK, they can't get brand new chest freezers that have those walls. They're all bare aluminum or aluminium, as they would say over there.
Aluminium. And why is that, John? Why is
well, I don't know why that is. That's a really good question. I have absolutely no idea what drove that decision over there to not make chest freezers with the white enamel. But that said, we've got a lot of people in the UK who are doing this, and that, and I say, don't let that become the hurdle that would stop you from moving forward.
Great. So back to the cost thing. So let's say I have a Frigidaire 15 cubic foot right in my garage, ready to go. Right. I invest in your book, which is totally recommended here. So I have that, and JB Welds, all the componentry. Let's start with the end. I mean, I'm sure you get asked this quite a bit. What sort of price tag would we be looking at for all the components to help convert this 15 cubic foot Frigidaire into a working, living, breathing cold plunge tank?
Right. So what I would suggest in terms of what I would call a solid working model, and that's one where it's waterproof. You don't have to worry about it. You've got water that's clean and it stays clean and it's easy to maintain. It will depend. There's a few little details that go in there, but as far as like a range, I would say somewhere between $900 to $1,200, maybe $1,500.
Got it. And what is the biggest chunk of that? Call it 1,000, 1,200. What is the biggest chunk?
The chest freezer is definitely going to be the biggest chunk of that.
Okay, so say someone already has that secured. What after the owning a chest freezer? How much are we looking at?
So after you own the chest freezer, we could say minimally $200. If you want something really nicely decked out, let's see. Let me just add up in my head real quick. So. Sure. Maybe $500 to $700 more.
Okay, so I have a chest freezer. It's ready to go. I have $500 in cash. I get your book, and then I just procure the components. And right. We don't, there'll be no spoiler alerts here. There's some weld material involved. And is there anything more you want to add on that? Because you could tell me more, but I do want to dive into this water filtration thing in particular. But is there anything more in terms of, is it that simple? I mean, I know it's not as simple, but about $500 in cash in your book and a freezer, and you're off to the races, generally speaking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, let me address the most common problem that happens all the time. And this is where people want to go cheap on sealing the seams. And what they look at, and this is a challenge where, it's great that we have, YouTube with all these different people now, hundreds of people putting out, hey, I got this chest freezer and I'm using it for cold water and here's what I did. And they just go over it, but they've only done theirs and they only do it that one first time. And then they never come back and tell you what happens. But I can tell you that after doing this since 2017, and I have personally been in, I can't even count, probably over a dozen chest freezers personally that I've helped convert. And after having talked with literally thousands of people from more than 90 different countries, I can tell you the single most just biggest problem is people using silicone or caulk to seal the seams instead of a two-part epoxy putty.
Okay.
And if we could get the message out for people to do just that one thing, I can't tell you how much time, energy, frustration, money would be saved.
Should we get some T-shirts made?
Yeah. Well, somebody, the question comes up frequently enough in my group that somebody suggested just a few months ago. He goes, just use JB Waterworld, people. And so he said, you should start a Facebook group. So kind of as a joke, I did, I'm not moderating it or posting content in there, but it's like, okay, we just need to get people to use the epoxy putty. JB Waterworld is probably the most well-known out there, but there are others, and especially in some countries where you can't get that product, where it's not like 4 or 5 times the price that it is in the US. There's alternatives, but the two-part epoxy putty is kind of like the
right. Yeah, that is the thing, and appreciate that. In addition to that, you're involved with liners, and the liner is an and, not an or. Can you speak to that?
Well, yes. So the liner for the chest freezer basically helps protect the insides. And if you have one of the chest freezers with the white enamel interior, the liner really is optional. That white enamel seems to hold up really well to the cold water. We have people now with 4-year-old chest freezers with just that epoxy putty seal and nothing else inside, and they're still going strong. Now, if you have the bare metal interiors, the liner is essential. And the reason for that is because those bare metal interiors are supposed to be made from aluminum. However, pure aluminum is expensive. And what typically happens is there are impurities in that metal, and those impurities will corrode when exposed to water. And then when you start adding other sanitation things in there, they will oxidize or rust. It'll speed up that process. And sometimes that corrosion and the leaking that is caused from that becomes evident within just a week or two. Sometimes it can take a year, but sometimes people won't notice anything for like 6 to 18 months, and then all of a sudden their chest freezer just dies.
Got it. Yeah.
So that's where the liners come in.
Yep. Let's talk about filtration.
Okay.
What have you learned, John, about filtration? And can you give us just a quick broad stroke of what you recommend and how important? I mean, let me just preface it by saying, well, here, I could turn the camera and show you my cold plunge is the 3rd largest lake in Minnesota. So
beautiful.
But that's only half the year. The other half of the year, I'm in the backyard in Minneapolis, and we get a lot of cold water from, put it this way. It's the challenge with backyard cold plunge in Minneapolis, when you talk about from October till maybe April, is too much ice. I mean, that we could go into a rabbit hole about that, but what is universal is this clean water thing. Like what I do when I sauna is I will leave the hot room in my backyard, and I have an outdoor shower, and I'll hit that for sure and dejankify all the sweat and stuff, and then go into my cold plunge pool from there. And that seems to preserve, the life of the water in, just through that natural thing. But I don't have any mechanical filtration. I'll just cycle my water every few sauna sessions and stuff. So I'd love to hear your take on filtration and water, and how often you need to change out your ice chest freezer cold plunge. So I'd love to hear more on that from your perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really big topic, and it's really driven by this. Again, I try not to be prescriptive in terms of saying this is what you must do. What I love to do is to find out what people's needs are and what their values are. So do you have more money than time? Do you have more time than money? Do what is your hygiene tolerance for, or risk tolerance for being in water that may not, seem to be clean, what other people would judge to be like dirty? So it's going to vary for everybody. But that said, there are really 3 things that you need for clean water. And those 3 things are circulation, filtration, and then sanitation. And there's a number of different ways to go about all of that. And but those are the 3 things that drive any conversation I have for a solution for someone. And then usually just try to figure out what their budget is, and then we can come up with a solution from there.
Mm-hmm. Within your book, you have some solutions, mechanical solutions, purchasable solutions. Is it as simple as a filtration system purchasable through Amazon? Is that?
Yeah, almost. So the circulation and filtration can be taken care of in a really simple way, and I've been through a number of different ways to go about doing this. I tried a lot of different or several different aquarium and pond filters, and I even went the full blown hot tub route, buying a hot tub pump and filter and plumbing and all of that. And that was way more complicated than what it needed to be. But what I have found works very elegantly, simply, and easily is a submersible aquarium filter that has a pump and a filter built into it.
Okay.
And that's it for the just the circulation and filtration.
Mhm.
And then as far as the sanitation, the best thing I found that at least meets my need to just have instant ready to go water that I don't have to do anything for 6 months. And the only reason I change it out every 6 months is because I want to clean my liner.
Mhm.
But the water could really stay clean indefinitely as an ozone generator.
Oh,
And
interesting. Tell us,
yeah,
so for sanitation and ozone generator, what does that look like and where do you get one?
well, the ozone generators, pretty much anything you can find on Amazon is not going to be a great bet. I've seen
Okay.
a lot of people who have used these kitchen ozone generators. You can get them for 60 to 100, 120, $150. And the big problem with those things is that they work great if you want to ozonate a glass of water. Those little tubes that deliver the ozone they have a pump in that unit, and it's meant to go under about 4 inches of water. Now, when you have a tub that's got 24 inches of water or 20 to 24 inches of water, that little pump is going to burn out a lot faster than it would. And it just doesn't have quite the same output.
Mhm.
And so that was the first big problem I discovered. Oops, you can't do that. The second problem I discovered was with the hot tub ozone generator that actually requires the hot tub quality pump and the filter and the plumbing. And then you got to have this thing called a Venturi injector, which mixes the gas with the water. And it's just a much more complex setup. And it's very expensive to add all that together. And when I found a company that was making an ozone generator that actually had the pump built into the ozone generator, that changed my life.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Wow. So do you incorporate that that ozone generator with your own personal system now?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I ordered that product for myself. And after I had disassembled, like the most expensive mistake that I made was the hot tub quality setup with, I don't know, it was close to probably about $900 to $1,000, probably quite a bit more if you count the deck that I built so I could put all the plumbing into the bottom of the chest freezer. Yeah, I probably spent about $1,300, $1,400 on just that one solution alone, and it didn't work. And when I say it didn't work, what I mean by that is that here in Texas, with the hot climate that we have, there was so much heat gain in that system that the water just would not get any colder than about 48 degrees.
Right.
And it wasn't meeting my needs. So I disassembled that whole thing and then went back to the drawing board, the proverbial drawing board.
Yeah.
And when I found this company, I ordered their ozone generator, and it worked so well. I went through a couple of different false, rabbit holes, trying to find the good filter and the circulation. But once I got that dialed in, the system, it just amazed me that my water just kept staying clean. And it wasn't until about 6 months later where I said, oh, the walls are a little, slick, and I need to take the liner out and clean it, that I discovered, okay, well, it cleans the water, but it's not going to clean the walls for me. But yeah, that was a life changer. I recommended that product for probably a couple of years, or maybe about a year, before I finally called them up and said, hey, I'm sending a lot of people your way. Can we create a relationship and see if we can do business together? And they said yes.
Oh, that's good. So so for people to support you in this process, okay, back to the idea of someone has their own ice chest freezer already secured. So check mark there. Now we're talking around $500 for getting your book and purchasing the components. That's the JB Weld and some other things, including the pump and the ozone generator. Is that correct?
Pretty close. Yeah, you might be close. I would say 500 to 800 would be a safe cushion.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
500 to 800. So people can go to your website, purchase your ebook. How do you get credit so that people, the great thing about the SaunaTimes tribe is that we all support, much like your tribe, we want to support your efforts in this. So how can someone purchase these components so you get credit for it?
Right, absolutely. I appreciate that. My website is chestfreezercoldplunge.com, and that is my website. I own that. So anything that like the my book, the ozone generators, everything that's on there, those I'm actually an official reseller for the ozone. So that's my relationship with that manufacturer, and anything that's purchased through there, I get credit for, and then that's really the bulk of what supports what I'm doing. And then I have some Amazon affiliate links on there for other
Perfect.
products that I recommend, and I have a separate page for that.
Great. So, relating to that, I have a $75 coal, what do they call those?
Stock tank,
Stock tank in
yes.
my backyard. And my system is, when I'm in Minneapolis, is every few saunas, I'll just drain it, water the garden, and refill it. It's not ideal. It works, but you have me personally quite intrigued about the idea of using the components you recommend in that realm. Do you have you gone down this road with others before?
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of people that are still using either stock tanks or let's see, the whiskey barrels or the even rain barrels. And then in in England, I love the names they have for things in
Yeah,
England. They call them wheelie bins. That's a
really
trash
good.
can, basically a trash can.
Sure, sure. So is that a matter of getting the pump and the ozone generator and going to town?
Yeah, it really is.
Mhm.
So, depending on the size of your stock tank, if you have one that's right around 100 gallons, 120 gallons maybe, those things, you could just put that same aquarium filter in there, a pump and filter, and then just put that ozone generator in there, and you're good to go.
That's super. That's great to hear. So even like think about this in an extreme case. There's in the world of sauna, there are saunapreneurs that are creating what I call the butts on the bench model, where you pay $30 and you have an hour and a half sauna session. And there is a bit of a void here because as you and I know, I mean, sauna and cold plunge, it's this 1 + 1 = 3 in terms of the
Yes.
exponential benefits there. So let's just say that we had a sauna business and we want to provide a cold plunge solution. Well, there are those that are offering this stock tank solution, but I'll just be straight up with you. I wouldn't go in one of those. I mean, the idea of commingling with sweat is not my idea of fun.
Right.
Um, I'm wondering if you could comment to that in terms of, is this aquarium pump and ozone generator enough to fight back a setup like this where you have sauna in the public domain with a cold plunge tank of this nature that's being used by multiple people? Or, I mean, what do you
Right.
think?
Yeah, I definitely have a number of people who've done this in the past, and primarily they've been like gym owners, who have a CrossFit gym or something similar to that, and they started out with a chest freezer cold plunge setup, and really the simple answer to that is no, and the main reason being that because you've got so many people, this little aquarium filter is just meant for like small fish tanks, and it's not going to really be capable, even with the ozone, of properly filtering out the just the amount of bacteria and things that can get in there. I think the ozone would handle it, but the big problem is that the filter change is going to need to happen way more frequently. But the bigger problem is going to be keeping the water cold enough,
Mm,
because every time you get in there, every human body that gets in that cold plunge, the water just it raises by about a degree Fahrenheit.
I believe.
So yeah,
Sure.
that's
And
that's an issue.
just to riff on that one, when we have I help a lot of people get in this business of sauna in the public domain and in that, and what I try to help or coach on is the exact opposite, where when you have a sauna that's about 180 Fahrenheit, you're thinking, okay, life is great. And now you start cycling bodies in there. Well, every body that is sitting on the sauna bench is a figurative ice cube to cool that room. Because when you think about a body being 100 degrees and the hot room being 180, and you have, I don't know, a good percent, 25-30% of the room taken up by bodies, that's cooling that room super quickly. So I can relate to the challenge from a cold plunge perspective through the heat. So
Right.
you have to fight it back, right? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah. And then another point as it relates to the cold is there are banyas, like these public saunas that have a cold plunge pool. You've probably been in them. I mean, they would be like in a at a health club or something.
Yes.
Yeah, those must have really high end commercial cooling systems as well as ozone generators and pumps and stuff. Is what?
Absolutely. Yeah. Once you get to that level, there are, you get under the lens or the regulatory body of the public health department. And
Mhm.
those guys have very strict regulations about what can be done and must be done in order to meet minimal water sanitation
Yeah.
standards. So yeah, we're talking most of those places, like if you go to a float tank, and go to one of those places, they're going to have ozone, ultraviolet light, and of course all the Epsom salts that are in there that makes you nice and buoyant also have a antibacterial property. But if it's a public plunge like that, they will most likely also be using chlorine,
Mhm.
which has to be tested on a regular basis, and they've got to keep charts and logs and everything.
Right.
So they're using secondary and in some cases triple X protect 3 times the protection, to keep that water clean.
Yeah, thank you. There was a great article in the New York Times about the baths, the public swimming baths in Iceland. It's culturally, it's a really big deal where they have these thermal baths and stuff through nature. Most of it is heated through the uh, um, thermal body of the earth up there. So all over Iceland, you have these public baths and stuff. And in the article, they were talking about how regiment they are about people that are using these are required to thoroughly shower before entering the baths. And I thought, man, that is a really progressively smart thing. I mean, does it get rid of bacteria completely? No, but if clean bodies are in this warm, massively warm pool, I mean, it's going to help in a big way. So it's sort of nip it
Right.
in the bud type
Oh,
theory.
exactly. An ounce of prevention is worth many pounds of cure in this case. And the funny thing about that, related to the cold water, is that I don't know where this myth got started, but some people will say, "Oh, it's cold water; the bacteria is not going to grow in there," and that is absolutely not true. The bacteria can survive microbes. Most of them can survive freezing or even below freezing for indefinite periods of time. The cold water will slow them down, but it will not stop them.
Right.
And so the personal hygiene really does make a big difference.
Yeah. Do you involve yourself with that either personally or within the Facebook group? Do people talk about taking a clean shower before cold plunge as a practice? Is that
Yes.
something that's done?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of my best practice recommendations. I always personally I cold plunge in the morning right after a shower.
Mhm.
And so I completely wash very thoroughly
Yeah,
before getting
yeah,
in.
and well, that's something you can do, like you say, the ounce of prevention. But that said, through this the triumvirate of circulation, filtration, sanitation, um, you're saying you don't change your water out, but every 6 months, and the reason is for the
Uh,
liner.
Right. So the ozone works really great for cleaning the water, but there's still algae or microbes that can get in there that will start to get the walls and the floor slick. So that ozone can't reach out and really grab something off of the wall.
Right.
And so when I notice my walls starting to get slippery, I say, hey, that's time for me to pull the liner out and clean it and then put it back in. And that's also something that I do just because I like to look at because of all the problems and the drama and the trauma that I had with my chest freezer early on. I want to take a peek at it every 6 months and just, 5 to 6, 7 months somewhere in there and just see what's inside and make sure it's still doing okay. So that said, I've got people that are this fellow that I did a build for, I don't know, a couple of years ago now. He said, well, look, I've got a swimming pool, and when I clean the walls of the swimming pool with my brush, I don't drain the water. I said, well, yeah, that makes sense. It's a pool. You got a lot more water in there. But he goes, why don't I just clean the walls of the chest freezer and have the filter take care of all the sediment? I said, sure, that'll work. So he only drains his once every 12 months.
Wow, that's insane. Have you been asked before about what it costs to run, you have three things plugged in. Am I getting that right? You have the freezer
Yes.
plugged in. And you, by the way, I know you're good. You're really good in your book about, the disclaimers and stuff. And a word to everybody listening is obviously before you enter your cold plunge tank, you unplug. You
Yes.
unplugging everything or
Yes. Everything. Yeah.
but there's
Everything.
three things.
The
Yeah.
chest freezer, any components and anything nearby, unplug it
Yep.
before you get in. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. including the toaster in the kitchen down the hall, right? Just in case.
Sure. I mean, yeah, if you're going to be getting out with wet,
Yeah.
water on your feet and creating a puddle in the ground, if you've got power tools or anything, if it's sitting in your garage, anything that's near that's plugged in absolutely must be unplugged.
But
And
for your setup, do I get it right in that there's three things plugged in, meaning the freezer, the pump, and the ozone generator?
that is correct. And there's actually one thing in between the freezer and the wall that is a life changer in terms of the practice, and that's a temperature controller.
Hmm. Is that a fourth mechanical device?
It is. And basically, what it does, so the chest freezer is designed to deep freeze food, which takes it down to below 9 degrees Fahrenheit. So somewhere between 0 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit. And what happens if you just leave that thing plugged in, you will have a solid giant ice cube after X amount of time, depending upon how warm your environment is, your climate there. And what happens is some people will, we started out like they use a timer and they would let it run in for a few hours a day, or they try to dial that in. But the moment the temperature changes, the amount of time you need to set that timer changes. And for me, that was too much of a hassle, right? So I learned probably the very first device I bought for my chest freezer setup was a temperature controller. And so it's got a sensor that goes into the water, and you program it, whatever temperature you want. I said 34 or 36. And then it's got a 2-degree differential on there. And so my water is always between 34 to 36. And that controller turns the chest freezer off and on, and it does all the work.
The controller turns it off and on based on the plug. So it's like you plug this thing into it so it controls the electricity.
Yep. The chest freezer plugs into the temperature controller, and then the temperature controller sensor tells the controller when to turn the chest freezer on and off based on the water temperature. So that thing is like awesome.
Hey John, do you have like a power strip for these components and
I do.
Unplug the power strip?
Yep. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah. Sweet. So where is your chest freezer at home?
I've got mine in my garage.
Nice.
So that's where it's set most of the time. I've gone through a few different moves that it's been on a back porch. For one point in my life, I actually had it in the middle of my living room. I was a single guy at that time, so bachelor, I could get away with that. But
That's sweet. And you mentioned the morning. Is that your routine? Is it 7 days a week? Tell us a little bit about your cold plunge routine.
Right, that's a good question. This is something that's also really highly individualized, and it really depends on what other goals people have. So really the best thing that I can say to preface this conversation would be to trust your own body and listen to your body, notice how you respond, and then adjust your training or schedule according to how you're responding to it. So for me, what I found is that my body can change anywhere from like, I'll do maybe 1 plunge a week to like 4 a week, mostly in the morning. Every once in a while, I'll do one in the evening where I feel like, just whatever's going on, maybe 3 hours before bed, I'll do that evening plunge, but that's a lot more rare these days. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, just depending on what else is going on, I'll just get a sense that I need to take a break, and I'll maybe take a week or 2 off. Mm-hmm. So, my practice is intermittent, and it's just dependent upon what I feel like my body needs in the moment.
Right on. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. The cold plunge community, Jesse Comer, you know Jesse.
I do. Yes. Jesse's an awesome guy. He was one of the first people that I actually did an interview with that wasn't related to like cold plunge technology, but just to talk with him. He wrote a book called A Practical Guide to Cold Training. And it was just we had a YouTube conversation, and Jesse's an awesome guy.
Awesome guy. Yep. He's been a guest on Sauna Talk. A listener of Sauna Talk recommended I connect up with Jesse, and I owe Jesse another, it's funny how life goes, just like with you. I mean, it's so great to connect with you. And I know one day we will meet again, we'll hang out and all that. But geez, with this whole Zoom world we live in now, people go back to their little caves, these are their little hovels. But and Jesse and I chatted quite a bit about the cold culture in the United States. It really kind of is a small community, a tighter community, I guess you could say. Do you have anything to say about that? Like in terms of the people that are, Wim Hof certified in our country here in the United States, people into this practice. We've obviously seen this grow, this practice grow huge, but it's a cool community. I don't know. Do you have anything to say to that?
No, I think it is a pretty awesome community. It is a small community. I think that we are almost still pre-viral, I would say, just because there's, it's not a common household everyday thing in the U.S. like it might be in other countries or other cultures, like in Poland or in those Nordics or
True,
Scandinavian countries
true.
where it's just something they've been doing for such a long time.
Right.
Um, and I think most people now, and the research, if you look at it, also will reflect this. But most of it is athletics. So most of the people who have been involved with sports, either in high school or college, will know about the ice bath and that experience and how it helped them. And that's really where most of the research, if you get on the PubMed and
Hmm.
do a search for cold water immersion, you'll find that there's all kinds of the vast majority out of I think there's last time I checked this, it hasn't been any time recently, but there was something like almost 4,000 published research papers on cold water immersion, and the vast majority of those are about athletics. And then
Mhm.
there's a growing number, a much smaller number, but a growing number that are talking about the general health benefits for anyone, regardless of whether or not you're an athlete.
Wow, that's fascinating. There's so many parallels to the cold and the heat in sauna and cold plunge specifically. A lot of people become interested in the idea of sauna because of the health benefits, both physical and mental. And you're alluding to the health benefits of the cold exposure in much the same way, and also in parallel. I can't tell you how many people have come to SaunaTimes and have invested in my ebook because they initially got into sauna through the cold. So it's sort of this two-way street. A lot of people that are sauna people, they got into sauna maybe at the health club, and when they were done with a sauna session, they would go shower off at ambient temp and get dressed. And start sweating again, but then leave the health club. So it's really kind of a neat thing how these two extremes have brought a practice together. I don't know if you'd like to speak with that.
No, yeah, that's really great. I mean, I used to have one criteria when I was looking for apartments, and the most important thing, like besides the location, was does it have a hot tub? And the last apartment that I actually lived in, I was fortunate enough to have a heat sauna, like a traditional sauna that was in their little fitness area, and I loved that. And we actually used to go between the sauna and the swimming pool, like at night, on the few days out of the year where it actually got cold enough to make that really worth it. But that contrast therapy is actually really amazing.
Yeah.
And I think there's something synergistic that happens between the heat and the cold. Like the heat allows you to actually do more cold, and the cold allows you to do more heat than you could
Yes.
otherwise without the other.
Yeah, and there's this great rubber band theory of the extremes that happen both physically and mentally there, where it sort of takes things from not from ambient to hot or ambient to cold, but those two polar extremes. And you touched on something very, very interesting about how this cold in your scope, the cold is very common in other countries, and it's becoming more common in America. But your Facebook group, and maybe you could speak to that a little bit. The story of it is really cool. I mean, you just started in a very organic way, reaching people. Maybe tell us a little bit about that, the development of that. And you mentioned about all these different countries. So love to hear a little bit on that.
Right. Well, what happened initially was, because I was having such a hard time finding any consistent information, and the way Facebook worked, it was very hard to search in that big Wim Hof group, right, which had so much information and which is filtering down so quickly. I think at this time there may have been somewhere between 20 to 40,000 people in the group. I don't remember the exact number, and I know it's like gone way up since then. But so one of the fellows that's an administrator or moderator on that group, Gerald, is a friend of mine, and I reached out to him and said, "Hey, would you be okay if I started a separate group to talk about chest freezers? This one specific thing, because there's a lot of details, and I think it's just getting lost here in this big group." And he goes, "Yeah, sure, that's a great idea." So Gerald was probably the very first person in my group besides me, and so what happened is I said, "Hey, can I just do one post on here?" And he said, "Yeah." So I put a post in that main group, and then a few people started joining, and it's really grown since then. It's been a very organic thing. I never set out to write a book or
Mhm.
start a group or a business for that matter, but it's something that grew, and I realized that I've had a passion for helping people, number one, But then, and I have a passion for teaching and education, but when that is added to the piece of transformation, when I see I might even get emotional about this, because the people that I get to talk to that are having these literally life changing, and in some cases life saving transformations that come from immersing themselves in a cold water practice. And I'm talking about just chronic disease or mental health issues, depression, anxiety, the benefits that come from that and how their life changes, that inspires me.
Oh, beautiful said.
And so,
Well, I can get emotional on that level as well, brother. I mean, we have a parallel universe, you and I. For me, helping others realize their authentic sauna dreams, to me, it's like a candle that lights another candle. It warms me in such a great way to be able to share my experience and passion and knowledge of good sauna building, and to know that there are others, that are able to leverage it for themselves. It's quite a joy, and there is something deeper than ourselves with that, isn't there?
yeah, absolutely. And I think when we had kind of talked initially about exploring if we could collaborate together, that was really one of the things that stood out for me about you, is that you do have a very deep passion for helping people with the sauna, and I got a sense of that immediately. So I think we are brothers and kindred souls in that way. Absolutely.
Amen. Amen. And the other common bond that you and I have is you're a very practical guy. You're not out there to rip people off and overcharge. We both wrote a DIY ebook. We both, feel, learn. We want to share what we've learned with others, so that they don't make the same mistakes or get ripped off in other ways. So you and I are both similar in that we're very practically minded, and it's nice that others, respond to that. That it isn't always the dollar signs in our eyes. I mean, you're trying to make a living here doing this. Is that right?
Yeah, it's looking like it's turning into that, and it's something that really delights me, that I could, at some point, actually support myself and my family through doing this and helping people full time with this. And it's actually grown exponentially in the last, I guess in the 3 years now. It was 3 years in September is when the Facebook group launched, and the ebook or the book came just shortly after that. But yeah, it's been growing, and I've been looking at that and just I feel just this like immense sense of gratitude, and
Right.
and in some ways awe of thinking that, yeah, I could actually make a life doing this and make a living doing this.
Well, you deserve it, brother. I mean, like I say, you're doing it from the heart, and you're doing it for great reasons to help other people, and you're very transparent about the fact that you have these affiliate links, and then your book is very reasonably priced. What is $28.95, something like
27.95? Yeah.
Yeah, right. I think I may have to raise the price of my book $2.95.
So there you go. You should. You deserve that. Right?
Yeah, and your book is so cool. I again, as a guy who wrote a DIY book, on sauna building, to page through and see, like you referenced, our parallel universes. You've really done a nice, clean job of literally helping people through the process, and demystifying the idea of turning a ice chest freezer into your own cold plunge tank. So applaud your work, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Really
I appreciate that acknowledgement. It means a lot coming from somebody who's in this DIY space.
Right on, man. Anything else you want to share with listeners to Sauna Talk? We didn't talk a lot about sauna. I got it. How, well, down in Austin, I'm going to connect you with a good buddy of mine who's moved to Austin from Minnesota. Our climates are so different. I can understand why the idea of a chest freezer conversion to an ice cold, a cold plunge is so relevant, because you don't get below freezing too much down in Austin, right?
Very rarely.
Yeah. And like I mentioned earlier, we have no problem with ice up in Minnesota, about 6 months of the year, maybe 5 months, whatever. So it's kind of cool. The whole tribe, other countries. I know Australia has a big interest in your book and in the work you're doing. What other countries? Is it all over the place?
It is all over the place. So I can say that And again, I don't remember offhand the list of 90 plus countries, but I would say the big ones are Australia, the UK. I've got folks in, actually, interestingly enough, people in Denmark, another Sweden, Germany, where it is cold a lot of the times, but, I've ordered my book and some other products. But yeah, it's interesting. And I've got people down in Mexico or somebody from Brazil just recently.
Cool.
So yeah, it's fun. Awesome. It's really what inspires me about that really is that I think in the current climate that we have, I feel sometimes disheartened by the amount of divisiveness that we all have, or that many people have, about whatever the topic is. And what I see in the cold water community is that we've got 7,000 people in this Facebook group, and we are all coming together to support one another. And it's not really about the cold water. It's really, we're supporting one another to better our health, whether that's physically or mentally or emotionally. And that ripple effect that comes out, not only for our lives, but our families, but our businesses, the world, when I can see people unifying for this one thing and to realize we all have so much more in common than what we do different, that's also very beautiful and inspiring for me.
John, thanks so much for being a part. I really enjoyed our time today. Tell us how people can find you one more time.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. Really appreciate you having me on, and it's always a joy to speak with you. Thank you. Looking forward to future conversations. If anybody wants to reach out to me, there's two main ways. One would be my Facebook group. Just search for Chest Freezer Cold Plunge on Facebook, and you'll find it. And the second place would be my website, which is chestfreezercoldplunge.com.
There you have it. John Richter, thanks, brother. Any final words to the guests? You summarized it beautifully. I look forward to seeing you out in the world as things open up again. Maybe I'll bring a mobile sauna down and you bring a couple chest freezers out. We'll put them on a snowmobile trailer or some sort of thing, and we'll activate. Maybe we'll just go to Barton Springs and create a gig. What do you think?
That would be fun. We should do that.
Right on. Any final words?
No, I think that's it. I would say that for anybody who is looking to just have some kind of amazing shift in their health, check out the cold. If you're not sure if you can commit to a DIY build or the budget, start with ice in your bathtub. It's really that easy.